Hi there, welcome to No Nonsense Whiskey. My name's Vin PF, and on today's episode we're doing something a little different. A couple of years ago, before I had like a kid and stuff like that, I used to do a little show on the channel called Sample Saturdays, and this is a little bit of a revival of that. You know, I don't have many more episodes of this planned in the future, but the idea being that when I get samples in, instead of just sort of covering them on something like Instagram or whatever, which I'd be honest, I don't really understand Instagram, I might do occasional videos like this to fill the gap in between the reviews, which are going to come out every Thursday as normal, and then obviously my whiskey and whiskey outs, which everyone loves, once a month. So this is kind of like a bridging gap between those. You know, sometimes it'll happen more frequently when I get samples in. I don't really say yes to samples much anymore, I have to admit, but they do come through occasionally. So today then, what we've got, if you remember a couple of weeks ago, I covered a Boutiquey whiskey company baseball card bourbon, and what they did is when they sent that through to me, they sent me through 4 samples of various other bits in their kind of US baseball card series and one other that isn't. You know, so it's 3 baseball card series and 1 that isn't. And I thought I might try them today, but of course I haven't got the bottles. So what I'm going to do, you know, on the old pedestal here, if my editing skills are up for it, I'm going to be sort of plonking a digital version of the bottle here so you can sort of visualize the one I'm talking about. But today won't be, these aren't reviews as always. You know, I stopped reviewing samples right at the start of the channel. I know you guys aren't into that and I'm not into it either, but samples are a great way of getting kind of like an indication of a whiskey. So that's what will happen today. I'll give you some basic, relatively off the cuff tasting notes. Of course, as always, I'm prepared before the video, so I do have some tasting notes that I've written beforehand. But I'll give you some overview of these drinks, let's say, because one of them isn't a whiskey, and then we'll go through them. But yeah, this will be slightly longer, maybe, dare I say, slightly less professional version of normal videos, if you even consider the normal videos professional. In any case, then let's get into the first one and see what we've got. I've got them lined up down here, a couple of tasting notes, and we'll just fire through these things, and I'll give you some first impressions. The first one, then, if we can do the whole thing, is well, they've called it. I mean, I'll show you the little sample bottles. I've had to do a little bit of investigative work on these because this is the information I got. So it's like Grapple. This is a Grapple Brandy, 4-year-old American brandy. So that sort of doesn't really exist. So I sort of had to go and look through it, and in the end, I found out that this is probably their Copper and Kings Batch 1. It's 45% brandy. Made by Copper and Kings. It goes for 50 quid. I think these are all half litres as well. You know, like that's a standard thing for Boutiquey whiskey. But yeah, it's an American brandy. Now, brandy's not something I'm really into. I've covered a couple of cognacs on the channel in my time. I don't mind some like quote unquote normal brandies. This one seems a bit odd, but we'll get into it and see what we've got and see if it's something you might like. But yeah, let's try on the nose then. Okay, so it's got quite a pungent nose. It's not a kind of typical. When I try typical cognacs, when I say typical, I mean like, you know, the kind of generic flavours of them. The sort of grape element that comes through, because obviously they're made from grape, right? I don't know if this is any different. I don't know what this is made out of, but for me, I'm getting heaps and heaps and heaps of kind of dried orange peel. So it's like it's not fresh. It's kind of been sat out in the sun a little bit, but it's also quite a lot of clove as well. And clove isn't a flavour that I really like that much, so the nose isn't that great for me, but interesting nonetheless. Let's try on the palate. Now it's yeah, it's so much clove on the palate, and it kind of sours out a little bit of aniseed, which I do like aniseed, but it's not enough. It's not enough to get rid of that kind of clovey smell. It's almost like, you know, at kind of Christmas time when people do that weird thing where they put cloves in oranges to cook them with, but then you come to eat it and there's a hole where the clove was and it isn't there anymore and you don't know where that's gone, but it's ended up in the food somewhere and you bite it by accident. That's the kind of vibe I'm getting off here. Now, I know some people like that, not this guy. So for me, no, I'll leave that one, but I thought I would cover it anyway because they sent it to me. So yeah, let's move on to the actual whiskies, shall we? And I did bring some water along with me today as well because I needed to rinse out in between each one. All right. Okay, next one then. So let's let's bring that up there. So the next one then, we have the information I was given was Kentucky Bourbon 3-year-old. That's it. Now, that isn't strictly correct, because this is what they're calling it, their secret bourbon number 2. So that's their batch number 2 of whatever. I don't know if the first one relates to this or if it's just a second secret distillery, which for some reason they're not allowed to tell us what it is. But in classic Boutiquey style, now if you ever go to a tasting where you've got a brand rep or someone like that who didn't make it, who isn't part of the sales team, I guess well they are if they're a brand rep, but you know what I mean. Now, when you're offline and you come across a secret distillery, they'll often give you a clue, or maybe even just tell you outright, because it's not written down or recorded or anything like that. People don't really care about stuff like that. The legalities behind it are what's important, because they're not allowed to say what it is for whatever reason. I don't know why. It's part of the agreement. Now, here's the funny thing about Boutiquey. Now, they're quite cheeky. You know, their labels are always awesome. Now, in this case, all of these labels have been like people from the distillery or some history or something like that. But in this case, they didn't. They picked one of their own people. However, on the website, they've given a brief timeline of the distillery and the dates that things happened. So, like, they're basically saying that before Prohibition, this distillery burned down, and then it had a turmoil history before it was rebuilt in like 2014. The stills turned on in 2016, that sort of thing. I can't remember the exact dates, but yeah. Anyway, even me, who isn't that well versed in bourbon, managed to do a little bit of googling and find out what distilleries match up with that. Now, for me, I'm pretty sure this is Green River. See if you can tell me any different. There'll be links in the description below to all of these whiskies and such, by the way, so you can go and check out that same information that I found, and if you want to do your own sleuthing and tell me different, please let me know in the comments below. But yeah, I'm pretty sure this is Green River. Getting back onto relatively normal stuff then, we've got a 3-year-old bourbon from a secret distillery. Now, this one here is coming in at, what did I say, it was 59.8%, so it's pretty hot. You know, it's these are all cask strength coming up. Brandy, obviously, different story. And this one's relatively cheap for a Boutiquey, 60 quid for the half litre, which we'll see. Anyway, let's get onto it then. Okay, it's pretty typical bourbon fare on the nose. It's 70% corn, it's 21% rye and 9% malted barley. So it's a pretty kind of, I guess what they would call probably a high rye bourbon. But I'm getting all those classic notes, but there's also a little hint of aniseed and licorice to this, which I'm enjoying a lot. I like that. I don't typically like the taste of licorice, but on the nose, I'm happy with that. Let's try on the palate. Oh wow, okay. That is huge. Right, so obviously there's a strong ABV going on here, so you've got to take your time with it, get some discerning palate off of it, but yeah, more of that aniseed, more of that licorice, bags of leather, bags of oak, a little bit of cherry. No, that's good. I like that. I like that a lot. I'm a big fan of high ABV bourbon, and to get that, I think 60 quid for a half litre, it's a lot of money, but I think that's pretty good value, actually. Pretty good value. Okay, let's have a quick rinse. Ooh. Alright, next one then. So third, up on there, we've got a Dad's Hat 6-year-old rye. Alarm bells, so you know me, I'm not really a big fan of rye, but I'm fighting it. I'm fighting the power. When I started the channel, I didn't like peat either, but I fought the power and figured it out. So I'm hoping that will happen one day with rye. And you know what? This don't smell half bad, but we are talking about 64%, which is monstrous, absolutely monstrous. And this sells for £100 for that half litre. So yeah, we're getting up in those realms of quite expensive, but they're saying it's 80% rye, 20% malt, which includes 15% malted barley and 5% malted rye, which I don't know much about bourbon, like I said before, but that doesn't seem very typical to me. But I'm game, the less unmalted rye, the better, right? So it does seem odd. I don't really understand what that means, but whatever. let's try on the nose and see what we've got then. So clearly, bags of that kind of rye bread. Those in the UK we have this thing called rye vita, right, which is like just a rye plank. I don't know if that brand is far-reaching or whatever. If it's something else, every country's going to have some kind of like rye wafer or whatever you want to call it. People use it when they want to lose weight and stuff like that, but I don't really like it. I don't really like rye, but it smells of that. Now, oddly, I'm getting heaps of like dried fruits, like sultanas, raisins, that sort of thing. Almost like it's had some sherry influence, which, you know, obviously it hasn't, but that's what I'm getting. Let's try on the palate. So much rye. So much rye, it's unreal. A bit too much rye for me. I am getting some sort of cherry drops in the background, you know, those cough sweets, that sort of thing. I mean, it's a big flavour. It's a big flavour. 64% doesn't quite make itself known. If I was doing this blind, I would have called that sort of late 50s. Not that into 64, but yeah, it's a bit much for me. It's a bit hot, a bit heavy. It's not the worst rye I've ever tried by a long shot. I'm probably going to finish that sample quite happily, but yeah, at 100 quid, not for me. Definitely not for me. Fair enough. Like I said, these are just quick impressions, not reviews. So we'll move on to the last one. I should say as well at this point, probably should have said it earlier, I'm just covering these in the order they were in the box. I could have made a bit of an effort to work out the ABVs and whatnot, maybe put the rye last, but I didn't really know what I was doing with the order, so I just went with what was in the box. Okay, finally then. I hope I've been doing that, because otherwise I look pretty silly just doing this to nothing, but never mind. This we have a Copperworks 3-year-old. Now, where's my bottle? Copperworks 3-year-old. This is a single malt American whiskey. 62.7%. Again, really high. 80 quid this one goes for. Yeah, so this is Copperworks. So that's over in Seattle. I think I've crossed that off already. So unfortunately I can't cross that off on my map, which you can now see. And what I didn't check before I put up that picture was whether it was going to be in frame or not, and it isn't. So I'm probably going to have to move that again at some point so that you can see it. Otherwise, you'd be waiting for me to get an Antarctica whiskey. Anyway, so yeah, we have this Copperworks 3-year-old, 67.7%, 80 quid. Whew, this has got a really weird nose. This has got like, if you bear with me for a little story, but one of my kind of picking points, my things that irritate me, whatever you call those, that grinds my gears, is when you get like an IPA influenced whiskey and it doesn't nearly taste enough of IPA. You know, you don't really get any of those hops, you don't really get any of that kind of lemony flavours that I like, the citrus. It just tastes like whiskey that's got a weird kick to it. But this, it absolutely reeks of like hops, and I'm calling it green barley. Like, we all know what malt smells like, right? We all know the malted barley. You go into a distillery, you're smelling that lovely kind of distillation happening. Green barley is something entirely different. A lot of Irish whiskey does that. A lot of Irish whiskey uses green barley, but by the by. Yeah, so getting a lot of green barley, some chocolate orange, marmalade. It's an interesting nose. The weird thing about it is the kind of like vibe that it invokes with me is a bit of a so when I was growing up, my mum used to burn a lot of incense sticks. Her vibe, you know, it's like a hangover from being like a hippie or something like that, but she had loads of this stuff knocking around, and I get a bit of a waft of that. Like, obviously incense changes flavours, you can buy all different ones, but the smokiness to it reminds me of being in a room full of that, basically. Interesting. Let's try on the palate. Okay. Yeah, heaps of those orangey flavours going on. Coffee, chocolate. To be honest with you, a lot of these words are coming straight from the marketing, but they did such a good job of those tasting notes. I don't usually agree with marketing tasting notes, but they're bang on with these. A few of them are mine, like the incense. That's my tasting note. But yeah, okay. Weird, but interesting. Weird, but interesting. I like that. A lot of money still, though. Wouldn't buy that, I don't think. That's a really high ABV. What did I say it was again? I've lost my sample. 62.7. That's high. Best of the bunch for me was the Secret Distillery, also the cheapest. You know me, I'm a cheap date when it comes to that. Gun to head, that would be the one I bought if I had to. So yeah, and it's probably more traditional in terms of flavour in some of these, but as we've seen across the board with these US baseball card things, they're really interesting whiskies that if you're even remotely interested in those, in how they've made it and the kind of tasty notes that they're bringing onto the table, it's probably worth having a look. But yeah, as I said earlier, links in the description below for all of these, can be bought on Master of Malt and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, there'll be affiliate links and whatnot. So if you are buying them, I will get a bit of a small aid towards the channel. But thanks very much for watching me. Let me know if you've stuck along this long. This is a longer video for me. And let me know if this is a kind of vibe that you enjoy. Obviously, I'm not going to review samples. That's not going to change anytime soon. But I do get samples in occasionally, and I would like to share those with you. So if you're interested in that sort of video, make sure you hit like, make sure you tell me in the comments below that you want to see some more Sample Saturdays, and I'll do what I can to bring them your way. In any case, I'll see you again on more known as Whisky videos, and I'm going to enjoy the last of this bourbon. Cheers.